The evening was quiet when David Miller and his wife Angela pulled into a gas station just outside of Dallas, Texas. They had been driving all day, and this stop was supposed to be a quick break before getting home. Angela stepped out of the car, stretching her legs and scrolling through her phone while David filled the tank. The neon lights flickered overhead, the faint smell of gasoline in the air. It should have been routine, just another stop on the road. But within moments, their world was turned upside down. A black and white police cruiser screeched into the lot, red and blue lights flashing against the pumps. Two uniformed officers jumped out, hands already on their weapons. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," one barked. Angela froze, startled by the sudden aggression. "I'm just waiting for my husband," she said calmly, showing her phone, but her words didn't matter. The officers moved in fast, as if she had been caught committing a crime. David looked up from the gas pump, stunned. "What's going on?" he called out, but the officers ignored him. They focused on Angela, demanding she put her hands on the hood. Confused and frightened, she hesitated for only a second, and that hesitation sealed the moment. Without warning, one officer pulled out a taser and fired. The crackle of electricity ripped through the air as Angela screamed, her body jerking violently before collapsing onto the cold concrete. David dropped the nozzle, gas splashing on the pavement. His heart pounded as he rushed toward his wife. "She didn't do anything," he shouted, only to be shoved back by the second officer. Around them, stunned customers stopped pumping gas, their phones coming out to record. Gasps echoed across the lot. Everyone knew what they had just witnessed was wrong. Angela lay trembling, trying to catch her breath, her face twisted in pain. The taser wires still clung to her shirt. David knelt beside her, his hands shaking with both rage and fear. He knew he had to keep his cool, but inside, every instinct screamed at him to fight back. Within minutes, more squad cars arrived. Sirens wailed as additional officers poured into the station, their radios crackling with tension. Some pointed flashlights at David, shouting for him to step away, as though he were the aggressor. Customers lined the edge of the parking lot, recording everything on their phones, whispering about how unfairly Angela was being treated. David helped Angela sit up, shielding her with his arm. "She's my wife. She's not resisting anyone," he yelled, his voice echoing through the lot. But the officers seemed deaf to reason. One officer stepped forward, hand on his holster, warning David to back down. The situation was spiraling, and David knew one wrong move could end in tragedy. Angela clutched his sleeve, whispering weakly, "Please, don't let them take me." Her fear only fueled David's resolve. He had seen plenty in his life. As a former intelligence officer, he knew how quickly power could be abused. This wasn't just about his wife anymore. It was about exposing the truth of what was happening right in front of dozens of witnesses. David rose slowly to his feet, locking eyes with the lead officer. His jaw tightened, his voice calm but laced with authority. "You just assaulted the wrong woman," he said. The officer smirked, clearly underestimating him. But David wasn't bluffing. He had training, experience, and most importantly, connections that these men couldn't imagine. The tension in the air was heavy enough to choke on. More flashing lights appeared down the road, a SWAT van pulling into the gas station. Officers in tactical gear spilled out, forming a perimeter as if they were preparing for war. The customers gasped, holding their phones higher, knowing something big was about to happen. Angela clung to David's arm as he leaned close to her and whispered, "It's time." Then, with the SWAT team closing in, he prepared to deliver the 5 words that would change everything. Words that would make seasoned officers freeze in their tracks. The gas station had transformed into chaos. Flashing lights, shouting officers, and a frightened crowd pressing against the edge of the lot. But in the middle of it all, David stood tall, his wife trembling beside him. As the SWAT team fanned out, weapons ready, he raised his voice just enough for everyone to hear. Those 5 words cut through the noise like a blade. For a second, silence blanketed the lot. The lead SWAT officer froze mid-step, his visor reflecting the neon lights. Civilians watching from behind their phones whispered in disbelief. It wasn't just the words, it was the way David delivered them. Calm, firm, like someone who had given that order before. The SWAT sergeant hesitated, then lifted his radio. "Stand by," he barked to his team. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The officers who had been puffing their chests a moment ago now exchanged nervous glances, suddenly unsure who exactly they were dealing with. Angela, still shaken from the taser, leaned into David. "What's happening?" she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "Trust me, they just realized they're not in control anymore." The lead officer from earlier, the one who had pulled the trigger on Angela, stepped forward, his voice cracking with false confidence. Don't try to play games with us. You don't get to give orders here. David turned his head slowly, his eyes locked on the man. You already crossed the line, he said evenly. You laid hands on my wife without cause. You escalated when there was no threat. And now, your SWAT team is realizing you've tangled with someone who knows the rules better than you do. The officer's jaw tightened. Around them, the crowd grew bolder. A man shouted, "Yeah, we saw everything. She didn't do a thing." Another yelled, "You can't tase someone for standing next to a car." Phones recorded from every angle, and the realization hit the officers. This wasn't going to stay quiet. The SWAT sergeant finally spoke, his voice low but urgent. "Sir, who exactly are you?" David reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone could see his hands. He pulled out a slim leather wallet and flipped it open. Inside was a government-issued identification card that most people would never see in their lifetimes. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sergeant stepped closer, scanning the card. His eyes widened. Then he looked at David with a mix of shock and respect. This says your former military intelligence. Clearance level for... David didn't blink. That's correct. And I still have people on speed dial who answer when I call. He leaned forward slightly. You want to explain to your commander why you allowed a decorated veteran's wife to be assaulted in public? Or do you want to fix this right now before careers end tonight? The sergeant stiffened. Behind him, members of the SWAT team shifted uneasily. The officer who had tased Angela now looked pale, his earlier arrogance drained away. For the first time, he seemed to understand the weight of what he had done. The atmosphere changed. The sergeant turned to his team and ordered, "Weapons down." The SWAT officers lowered their rifles in unison. Though their eyes stayed glued to David, the crowd erupted in murmurs, phones capturing every second. Angela managed a faint smile through her pain. "They're listening," she whispered. The sergeant gestured toward the cruiser. "Get her medical attention, now." A pair of EMTs rushed forward, kneeling beside Angela as David helped ease her into their care. The bystanders applauded, some even shouting words of support. "Stay strong, we're with you." But David wasn't finished. He stepped closer to the sergeant, his voice dropping so only he could hear. "This doesn't end here. Every camera caught what happened, and I guarantee Washington will know before the night is over." The gas station, once a scene of terror, was now heavy with the realization that the officers had underestimated the wrong man. David's words had flipped the entire situation, and it was only the beginning. As Angela was helped into the back of the ambulance, David pulled out his phone. The sergeant stiffened, already guessing what was coming. David scrolled to a saved number and pressed call. Within seconds, a voice answered, a voice that carried more authority than any officer on the lot. "This is Colonel Reeves," the man said sharply. "Colonel, this is David Miller." David replied, his voice calm but firm. "We've got a situation at a gas station outside Dallas. Local officers just tased my wife without cause. SWAT was deployed. I need oversight, now." The colonel didn't hesitate. "Stay put. Federal observers are en route. No one moves until we arrive." The sergeant overheard every word. His throat tightened. This wasn't just a civilian making threats. This was a man with direct lines to military brass. The weight of what was about to unfold pressed down on everyone. By now, the gas station was surrounded. Dozens of bystanders were recording live, streaming the incident to Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. Comments poured in. "They tased an innocent woman. This is abuse of power. Who is this guy?" David turned to the crowd, his voice strong but measured. "Thank you for recording. Don't stop. The truth needs to be seen." People nodded, emboldened. What had begun as silent observation became a unified front. "We've got your back," one man shouted. A young woman added, "This is going viral already. The world is watching." The officers who had once held all the power now looked cornered. Their every move was under scrutiny, not just from the man in front of them, but from thousands online. 15 tense minutes later, 3 unmarked SUVs screeched into the lot. Men in dark suits and earpieces stepped out, their presence radiating authority. The lead agent strode toward David, offering a firm handshake. "Mr. Miller, we've been briefed. Colonel Reeves contacted us directly." The sergeant saluted instinctively, sweat dripping down his brow. The agent ignored him and turned to David. "We'll be taking over from here. These officers will be relieved of duty pending investigation." David's gaze shifted to the officer who had fired the taser. The man's face was ashen, his hands trembling. "I didn't know," he started, but David cut him off coldly. "You didn't need to know who I am. You needed to know the law. You needed to treat people with respect. You failed at both." The agent gestured, and 2 of the officers were led away, their badges and weapons confiscated on the spot. The crowd erupted into cheers, phones capturing every second of justice unfolding in real time. Angela, now resting in the ambulance with an oxygen mask, managed a weak smile when she saw the officers being escorted away. "You did it," she whispered to David. He kissed her forehead softly. "No, we did it. You stood strong. The people recorded. And the system is going to answer for what happened tonight." The federal agent approached again. "Mr. Miller, this won't end here. There will be hearings, reports, and accountability. You have our word." David nodded, but his expression was hard. "Good, because this wasn't just about my wife. This was about every person who's ever been silenced, mistreated, or ignored. Tonight, they tried to humiliate her. Instead, they exposed themselves." The crowd applauded, their voices rising together. For the first time that night, the gas station didn't feel like a crime scene. It felt like the start of something bigger, something that could not be buried under silence or paperwork. But David knew it wasn't over yet. When the sun rose the next morning, this incident would be on every news channel in America, and the system that tried to break them would soon find itself on trial. By sunrise, the incident was no longer just a local story. It was everywhere. CNN ran the headline, "Texas woman tased at gas station husband's 5 words, stop SWAT in its tracks." Fox News, MSNBC, even independent outlets had their own takes. Clips from bystander videos flooded social media. The moment David shouted, "Stand down, I outrank you," replayed millions of times. TikTok duets, Twitter hashtags, and Facebook shares pushed the story into viral overdrive. Angela, resting at home with her husband by her side, watched the news reports in disbelief. "David, the whole country knows." He simply nodded. "Good, they need to." At City Hall, the mayor called an emergency press conference. Cameras flashed as he stepped to the podium, his voice heavy with urgency. "What happened last night is unacceptable. The officers involved have been suspended, and a full investigation has been ordered. Our citizens deserve accountability." Reporters pressed for more answers, but the bigger shock came from Washington. David's connections had already reached Capitol Hill. A congressman, Angela's cousin, spoke passionately on the House floor. "This is not just about one family. This is about systemic abuse of power. If law-abiding citizens can be brutalized at a gas station, then none of us are safe. We demand justice." Within hours, the Department of Justice announced it would review the case. Meanwhile, the officers who had once barked orders and flexed their authority now sat in a holding room under federal guard. Their badges stripped, their futures uncertain, they were forced to watch the same viral videos that had made them infamous overnight. The sergeant buried his face in his hands. "We're done. Career's over. Maybe prison." The taser officer shook his head, panic in his voice. "All we had to do was treat her like a human being. That's it." For the first time, they realized what David had meant. This wasn't about knowing who he was, it was about knowing what was right. And they had failed, spectacularly. That evening, David and Angela agreed to a televised interview. Seated together, holding hands, they faced the cameras. Angela spoke first, her voice calm but strong. "I'm not just a headline. I'm a woman who was humiliated, tased, and treated like I didn't matter. But I do matter. We all matter." David leaned forward, his eyes steady. "I didn't stop them because of who I am. I stopped them because they forgot who they're supposed to be, protectors, not predators. My 5 words weren't just for them. They were for every American who deserves dignity and justice." The nation listened. And for once, people didn't just scroll past the story. They shared it. They talked about it. They demanded change. By the time the broadcast ended, thousands had signed petitions calling for reforms in police training, accountability, and oversight. Angela's story had become more than a viral clip, it had become a movement. Weeks later, federal charges were filed against the officers, including excessive force and civil rights violations. The city settled with Angela and David, issuing a public apology. But for David and Angela, the victory wasn't the money or the headlines. It was the knowledge that they had turned a moment of pain into a spark for change. As they stood together on their porch, watching neighbors wave and strangers stop to thank them, Angela whispered, "We didn't just survive that night. We made it matter." David squeezed her hand, "And now, they'll think twice before tasing someone's wife at a gas station again. The world may forget headlines, but it would not forget this story. Because sometimes, 5 words are enough to shake the system to its core."